I've been seeing a lot of talk online recently about things like the Nephilim and the giants and just spiritual concepts that are even a little bit discussed in the Bible as well. But there's a lot of misinformation out there too. And I'm not going to claim to be an expert about this, but I did have a conversation with Source about this recently. Honestly, like, I speak directly to Source now. When I first started, I started talking to angels, and then I started talking straight to Jesus, and I will talk to other ascended masters as well. And then a year or two ago, I can't even remember which, time is passing so quickly, but Divine Father wanted to start speaking to me directly, and I did confirm and clarify that that is Source, the creator. He introduced, I shouldn't even say he, but introduced itself as Divine Father because I grew up Christian, and so that's what I can relate to the most, even though I don't consider myself religious anymore. But now I speak directly to God, Source, Creator, however you want to think of it. And I actually recently asked a bunch of questions about this stuff because I was getting confused and I wanted to clarify these things in my head. And this isn't twin flame related, but it is spiritual related, and the twin flame journey is a spiritual awakening journey. So I just want to tell you guys what Spirit told me, and if you find it interesting and you want to log it in your brain, go for it. And if you don't, whatever. I don't care. It's up to you. So this started because I was getting confused between the seraphim, the Nephilim, and the Elohim, and what was what. So first off, the seraphim are higher angelic beings in the angelic hierarchy, which I did know that, but I clarified it for sure. The Elohim, I did not realize this. I thought the Elohim were also angels. The Elohim is God. The Elohim is the creator. And actually, what it told me was that the Elohim is basically like its name. Like I'm Jessica, and God is the Elohim. Although you wouldn't say the Jessica. So, and I'm used to the Elohim. But anyway, and what I wrote down was God, the creator. There is not more than one, even though the word is plural. Like, that's part of it. Like, what's confusing about it, the word itself is plural, and it refers to more than multiple, but it's one. There are some spiritual teachers that teach that there are multiple creator gods, but the Elohim told me that that is incorrect. There is only one creator God. It has no gender, which is why I said I shouldn't say he. That was just like my religious upbringing. It was the first supreme being and created everything else. Everything was only created from light. It did not create from darkness, but it created the dark separately. So everything was created from light, and part of what was created was the dark. And that, of course, is because of worlds that need to have polarity and duality and the lessons that come from that. But the creation of everything was only created from the light. Nothing created the Elohim. It just existed. It's not the universe, even though people use that terminology. It's, you could say, the mighty spirit, but not the great spirit. That was specified. Not the great spirit, the mighty spirit. And again, confirms that that's who I've been speaking to. It does not have masculine and feminine aspects. I can call it Elohim or God. I say God with the big G. And there are lower gods below it as well. They're not source creator. They're not the creator God, but they are in a lower rank. Like, just like there's a demon hierarchy, there's a God hierarchy as well. They're not the God, the Elohim, but there are gods and goddesses as well. And the Elohim is not an angel. Jesus versus the other ascended masters. He is not the Son of God the way we are taught. He is a normal ascended master going through the soul growth journey process like all ascended masters. He's an advanced soul, already incarnated in other lifetimes and worlds as well. His mission was to serve as an inspiration to guide humanity back to the light. Earth spent many thousands of years descended in order to experience darkness. It was time to start guiding humanity back to the light. So Jesus, Yeshua, and other ascended masters incarnated around the world in different cultures, creating different religions to guide humanity towards ascension. He did not actually save humanity from their sins because sins aren't even a thing in spirituality. It's only a thing in man-made religions. But this was the story that was presented to the world in order to inspire humanity to find their way back to the light and to ascend, to awaken and ascend. What made Jesus special, along with some of the others in other religions, because, other religions have their own versions of Jesus or special figures and avatars, is that at the time, there were not many ascended masters incarnated on earth, especially due to the lower frequencies during those descended times. So he had a very specific mission, as did Mother Mary, in carrying him and bringing him to earth in the first place, to come and lift the vibrations of the planet and guide people to Christ consciousness. And that's not something that very many, even ascended masters, could do. He is considered the Son of God, being directly from God, but really because he's a higher vibrational ascended master and Earth didn't have very many at the time. There were others spread out around the world as well at various times in history. And the story of his miraculous death and ascension was the story that humanity needed in order to wake up and return to Christ consciousness and ascend. More and more ascended masters are returning now in order to continue to help the ascension process, and they will continue to return, but they are returning as soul fractals in many different people. Like, you're not going to get, Jesus is not going to appear in the sky, and other ascended masters are not going to appear on earth, and people are going to be like, that's Jesus, that's Buddha, that's Kuan Yin, that's Isis, or whatever. And more and more and more. And actually, I don't think Isis is an ascended master. She's a goddess. But anyway, they're not going to appear like that. Their soul fractals are splitting, kind of similar to twin flames, but not exactly like that. And attaching to, connecting with other souls and coming into the world again through many people. Through multiple and many people. And that is how the ascended masters are returning to the world now. And with ascension, like I said, you're not going to see Jesus in the sky suddenly appear and go through, I don't even remember what it's called, if I'm being honest, because it's been that long since I've been so religious. But that's not going to happen. It's people coming back to Christ consciousness, and it's from within and from the reincarnating of many ascended masters through their soul fractals in the new, like, crystal children that are coming into the world. And there are already some adults like that as well now, but definitely lots and lots and lots of the children coming. The Nephilim are not hybrids of angels reproducing with humans. They are fallen angels, and they are the Anunnaki. They are giants. But fallen, in this case, does not mean that they became evil. It means that they chose to stop being angels and experience being interdimensional beings instead, hence coming down from the higher dimensions, falling to the lower dimensions. So they're not angels that were like kicked out of heaven because they chose to be evil. They are angels that chose to experience being interdimensional beings, being aliens, being Anunnaki in this case, hence fallen from the higher dimensions to the lower ones. I'm going to run out of time. I'm going to have to go to a second video, okay? But I'm going to keep going for now. In the lower dimensions, you can experience being both good and evil. So accordingly, some are good and some are evil. Some Nephilim are good, some Nephilim are evil. Some Anunnaki are good, some Anunnaki are evil. And honestly, that applies to like almost all types of beings from anywhere. They came to Earth. Okay, that's a story I should go to in the next video. So you want to know about the Anunnaki? Next video. Okay, so we were talking about the Nephilim and the Anunnaki, and if you are just seeing this and you didn't see the first video, I am reading to you my conversation with God, the Elohim, source energy, about the differences between the Seraphim, the Elohim, the Nephilim, Jesus and the Ascended Masters, and some other spiritual concepts, just to clarify what I am being told directly from source, God, creator, myself. That's up to you if you want to believe me, but I can assure you, without going into my minimum of 5 hours long story of how I got here and why I know that my communications are safe and protected from interference and from any issues, and I know that I can trust who and what I'm speaking to, you can trust me. But that's up to you to decide. Anyway, I am confident in what I channel and my communications with spirit for more reasons that I can explain. Like I said, it would literally take me a minimum of 5 hours to tell you all of the reasons why. So, anyway, back to the Nephilim. Okay, as I said, the Nephilim are not hybrids of angels reproducing with humans. They are the Anunnaki. They are fallen angels, but that does not mean angels that decided to be evil. It means angels that chose to experience being interdimensional beings. Now, let me actually back up for a second because I did not explain this in the first video. Angels exist in the higher dimensions between the 10th and the 12th dimension. The Ascended Masters are up there as well, and so are our souls when they're not incarnated into beings of some type somewhere in the lower dimensions. You know, there's humans in the third dimension, but interdimensional beings, aliens, galactic beings, whatever you want to call them, they exist as well in the, generally, from the 6th dimension to the 9th dimension. This is from a previous conversation I've had with spirit. So, like, the 10th, 11th, and 12th dimensions are where the souls, like these souls reside, not incarnated. Our own souls not incarnated. That's what you would consider like heaven, basically what we've been taught about heaven, or to imagine it as, and where angels are, and where Ascended Masters are. But our souls incarnated are in from the 3D to the 9th dimension, from the 3rd dimension to the 9th dimension. Like I said, Earth and super low dense worlds are 3rd dimensional. The galactic beings, interdimensional beings, I can't say it, are usually generally between the 6th dimension and the 9th dimension, somewhere in there, 6, 7, 8, 9, one of those. So the angels wanted to come down from the 10th dimension. These angels, the Nephilim, these fallen angels, wanted to come down from the 10th, 11th, 12th dimensions and experience being interdimensional beings incarnated into whatever type of body it is that the Anunnaki have, and experience that. And that is how they became fallen angels. But it does not mean that they decided to be evil. It means that they decided to experience the lower dimensions. The lower dimensions have both good and evil in them because they're lower dimensions, and you're supposed to experience that in the lower dimensions. You're supposed to experience the difference between good and evil. Hence, it's not like they were up in heaven and they like rebelled against God and they were like, I want to go be evil. I want to go work for Lucifer. That is not how it happened. That is not how it worked. It was, I want to experience the human experience, as you could say. I want to experience the difference between good and evil. I want to experience being incarnated in a body. So, falling down from the higher dimensions, choosing to be in the lower dimensions and experience those things. Some are good, some are evil. Okay, so now getting to the Earth story. They came to Earth. This is something that I actually heard from somewhere else, and then I also confirmed it with the Elohim. The Anunnaki, the Nephilim, they came to Earth to mine for gold because their planet, where they came from, which I believe, it's not in my notes right here, but I believe it was Planet X, which is also Chiron, I want to say. but don't quote me on that because I can't remember for complete certainty right now. Anyway, their planet was suffering. They needed the gold for some reason that I can't remember right now. And so they came to Earth to get it. Earth was a high vibrational planet with only animals, no humans as we know them at the time that they came to Earth, which, like I said, Earth was a high vibrational planet at the time. And what Spirit told me a while ago was that Earth was, I don't remember for sure, I want to say 6th dimensional, but it could have been a little bit higher than that. I don't remember exactly where. But anyway, it was higher than 5D. So the Anunnaki or Nephilim chose to perform experimentation on gorillas to create Homo sapiens, hence evolutionary theory. Whereas when the Elohim created, he created from nothing. It created from nothing. But the Anunnaki Nephilim created Homo sapiens from doing this experimentation on gorillas. The Nephilim were not supposed to do this. They had to create, let me go back. The Nephilim were not able to create from nothing. They had to create from something else, hence using the gorillas. But they were not supposed to do this because they did not ask permission, and they should have understood this since they were angels before. The Elohim saw what was happening and chose to allow it to happen just to see how it would play out and what would end up happening. But the Elohim did still end up banishing them from Earth once they completed their task. And there's also lots of stories about that period of time in history when the giants, the Anunnaki, were using those Homo sapiens that they had created as slaves to help them mine for the gold and to, run their little civilization that they had here briefly. I don't know how brief it was, but yeah. So there are stories about that, but it's important to remember that they weren't all evil. They weren't all bad. There's a lot of people that paint the Anunnaki as straight up evil who did all of this to humans, and that's not exactly how it worked. They came here because they needed gold to save their planet. They chose to create humans to help them, and they did treat them like slaves, but they weren't really evil, and they were selfish. Let's say that. They were selfish. They did end up being banished from Earth for it, though. And the reptilians that also came to Earth around the same time frame, although a little bit before, I think, the Elohim also banished the reptilians to Middle Earth, or to at the very least to be underground. Actually, I think there's a distinction there. I don't think they were banished to Middle Earth. Middle Earth is a different realm and worlds. I shouldn't say worlds. It really actually is in the middle of Earth. But let's say realm. I don't think they're in Middle Earth. They're underground. They were banished to be underground. They were also told, both were told, you are not allowed to manipulate the DNA of humans, but reptilians got around that by traditionally procreating and reproducing with humans instead of doing it the way the Anunnaki did. But anyway, let's continue. I lost my spot though. Okay, so once they completed their task, they were banished for doing this and for abusing the humans' help while they were on the planet. Oh, see, I just said this. Because they were giants, humans thought of them as gods, and they were likely taught that as well, just for the respect and to be able to command them. And then I also talked about how the reptilians also distorted the human DNA by reproducing and therefore inserting demonic DNA into the human bloodlines. So that's how demonic DNA has gotten into some humans because of how reptilians reproduce with them. Earth spent a period of time this way, but eventually the Elohim oh my gosh, I'm gonna run out of time again. Okay, I'm gonna have to pause here because this next section is too long to fit into 30 seconds. So hold that thought. If you are coming across this video in the wrong order, go back and watch the previous videos so you can get the full story on the Seraphim, the Elohim, the Nephilim, Jesus and the Ascended Masters. I'm right now in the middle of the story of the Anunnaki and how they came to Earth and what they did and how they were banished from Earth and why and all that stuff. So I'm picking up where I left off Like I said, I don't want to waste time recapping, so go back and watch the previous videos if you didn't see that. Okay, so like I said, the Anunnaki manipulated the DNA of gorillas to create humans, which the Elohim chose to allow them to do to see what would happen, but they didn't ask permission, and they did end up being banished for doing so. But I didn't say this before. By the time that came about, they had already gotten the gold that they needed, so they didn't have a purpose on Earth anymore. So they were fine. They were fine leaving. They didn't try and fight it. There was no animosity. There was no war. They were perfectly fine leaving and going back to their home planet. They had their own issues on their home planet that have continued, but they didn't have an issue about leaving Earth. The reptilians did not want to leave Earth. They were commanded to go underground, but they still distorted the human DNA by reproducing with humans and inserting demonic DNA into the human bloodlines. And that is how it contributed to the process of Earth descending, because of tainting humanity and inserting that like evil energy literally into the human blood. And this is something else that people don't understand. It's really largely widely talked about how the Archons, the Draconians, the Reptilians, they took over Earth, ruled Earth in their evil ways, and forced Earth and humanity into these reincarnation cycles and all this stuff. You need to understand, at least the way I understand it, that Earth was always supposed to go through a descension cycle to experience being 3D. Like I said in the previous video, Earth was originally a higher vibrational planet. I don't remember exactly where it was at. I know that it wasn't 9th dimensional. So it was 6th, 7th, or 8th dimensional. And it was supposed to go through a journey and a process of descending down, falling, like we talked about with the Nephilim, coming down and becoming a 3D planet in order to experience what that means. And for ultimately also for humanity to experience what that is and what that's like. And, I didn't ask the Elohim, I didn't ask Source about this at the time, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the reason why the Nephilim and the Anunnaki were permitted to come to Earth, permitted by God to come to Earth and start that process by doing the things that they did, because it was part of Earth's natural evolution and what it was supposed to go through. So from the 4D perspective, yeah, all of these different beings that are being perceived as evil came to Earth and, destroyed it, are evil, took it over, evil running the world, the reincarnation cycle, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then, of course, you can get into all of the really horrific things, but we're not going to go there because we don't have time for that right now. But it was like that. The 4D perspective is that they did all of that to Earth and humanity, but the 5D perspective is that Earth and humanity were supposed to go through that. We're supposed to experience it and understand the difference between good and evil and what it's like to live in a 3D world. And along the way, it was also supposed to change and come back, and Earth is supposed to ascend now. Earth spent its period, Earth came down. I don't know for certain, but I believe that, Lemuria was first, like, in the descension process. Lemuria was in there somewhere where it was still more higher vibrational, and then it was Atlantis. I'm going down, but I should really be going this way because it's a timeline. I'm thinking of a timeline. So Earth was higher dimensional, higher vibrational, and it's coming along. Lemuria exists, but Earth is in the descension process. This is a process that took thousands of years. Okay, it didn't take the same amount of time as what they say in evolutionary terminology, but it did still take thousands of years, many planetary ascension cycles, which are 26,000 years each. So there was Lemuria, and then it was Atlantis, and Atlantis is really when Earth came down from 6D to 5D, and then the more and more of the darker beings came to Earth during that period of time, like Atlantis had so much going on and it attracted these beings, but then they also took advantage and resulted in the fall of Atlantis, which resulted in the separation of our consciousness, like our 3D consciousness and higher 5D consciousness. Like I channeled, literally felt it. I refelt it. My own higher self being ripped out of my body because of that descension process and the fall of Atlantis and Earth coming down from 5D to 4D and 3D. 3D and 4D are kind of merged because 4D is the spiritual side of the 3D. But the 4D still has like the ego and lower density aspects of ourselves and those spirits. So anyway, so when Earth and humanity could no longer support 5D, our higher selves got ripped from our bodies because our physical bodies could no longer support that. We no longer had our light bodies. We had descended into 3D carbon-based bodies, and it could no longer support having our higher selves within it. Flip that. Talking about ascension, talking about the twin flame journey, the spiritual rebirth process that we're going through. I say all the time, we are reintegrating our higher selves. It's the reversal. The fall of Atlantis and the separation of our 3D selves and our 5D selves, we're going through the reverse of that now, and they are merging back together as we are ascending right now, okay? But anyway, going back to this time in history. So the fall of Atlantis, the separation of ourselves, the evil beings taking over Earth. Going back to where I wrote, Earth spent a period of time that way, and eventually a period of time that way with the mixing of the demonic DNA into the human bloodlines by the reptilians and the draconians and the archons and all that. Eventually, though, the Elohim created a pure race of humans without the demonic DNA and potentially other factors that may have been inserted by the Anunnaki that I don't know about. And that was the chosen race. And of course, that's where religion talks about all of that, the chosen race. It was meant to be the creation of the 144,000 bloodlines of higher vibrational souls that would lead humanity back towards ascension the way that it is meant to happen, and coming through Adam and Eve. So Adam and Eve were not the first people in general on Earth. They were real, though, apparently. Not just a story. But they were the first ones created by the Elohim of the higher vibrational souls with the, I lost my spots. The pure bloodline without the demonic DNA, and that's that 144,000 where it comes from. But it's not 144,000 people. It's not even 144,000 individual souls, because they have gone through soul split processes as well. So there's multiples, but it's the 144,000 higher vibrational original souls that may have also split, that are meant to help humanity find their way back through the ascension process. And that is the chosen people that some religions refer to. Over time, those races did end up reproducing with the original humans, though, the ones that do have the demonic DNA. So sometimes you will find these spiritual workers who need to have demonic DNA removed from them, from their spiritual DNA as well, because of how over time the 144,000 bloodlines did reproduce with the original bloodlines that were created by the Anunnaki and the reptilians. RH negative is the original humans created by the Anunnaki, not the pure race that the Elohim created later on in order to bring the 144,000 to Earth for ascension purposes. And the Nephilim still exist on planet X, where some are good and some are evil. Okay, if you are just tuning in, I have been talking about my conversation with God, Source, Creator, however you think of it, discussing the differences between various types of spiritual beings and interdimensional beings, and just providing some clarity, because I was confused. So I was asking for clarity myself. And I was asking about the Seraphim and the Elohim and the Nephilim, And then I talked about what the Anunnaki did, the Nephilim are the Anunnaki, what they did coming to Earth, and I talked about Jesus and the Ascended Masters. Okay, and so now where we're at is angels versus interdimensional beings. Because I actually see some spiritual teachers say that they're the same thing, but they're not the same thing. I did not believe that, never resonated with me, but I confirmed it as well. They are not the same thing. And I actually did discuss this in one of the previous videos. The angels exist in the higher dimensions between the 10th, 11th, and 12th dimensions. And that's there. You're not incarnated in a body up there. I recognize that some of the beings up there, the angels and the ascended masters, they have a form that people can recognize, but it's not the same as being incarnated in a body. You know that aliens and interdimensional beings, they have their own bodies as well. They are souls incarnated in bodies. Their bodies are just different. They're not made like human bodies are. You know, they live in different worlds and other higher dimensions. They're not the highest dimensions. They're not heaven as you might think of it, but they are other worlds in other dimensions. You know, the incarnated worlds are like from the 3D to the 9D, and then the heaven worlds and realms, we'll say, are the 10th through 12th. And then, of course, also where our souls reside when they're not incarnated in bodies. But that's a whole other thing that I don't know very much about. But I have heard from examples from hypnosis sessions of life between lives is it sounds like it's practically like its own world as well, to be honest. The way that I think of it, the way that it makes sense to me based on the things that I've learned so far is I think about the Matrix and how they live somewhere, I don't even remember what it's supposed to be, but they live somewhere else and then they like plug in to these bodies. That's the way I think of it. Like our souls like have like this other world where they exist in, and then they like plug into our incarnations on Earth and wherever else. That's the way that I think of it, that it makes sense for me in my mind. And in those worlds where our souls reside, like our souls are connected with our soul family members, and they all they plan out the lifetimes that they're going to incarnate into. And I've heard and read or whatever, I'm not sure what the right word is because I've collected this information over time, but that our souls are like shown almost like a trailer, like a movie trailer practically, of like, this is what the lifetime will be like. These are the lessons that you'll learn. This is what you'll go through. And the soul is like given options of, okay, well, what do you want to take this time? What lifetime do you want to take this time when you incarnate? And, you know, you'll end up going through all of them, but like the soul gets to choose and gets to plan it out and decide which soul family is going to incarnate with them, and what the roles are going to be and what the lessons are going to be and all that stuff. And it feels like it's a whole nother world, which is really cool to think about. But like I said, I don't know very much about it other than basically what I just told you. That's something that I would love to research more, but there's only so much time in the day. So anyway, so angels are up there along with the ascended masters and our souls, our oversouls, however you want to think of it. And the interdimensional beings are ninth dimension and below, and they are not the same thing. And as we discussed about the Nephilim were angels that wanted to experience being interdimensional beings, that wanted to experience incarnating into bodies, hence being fallen angels and becoming the Anunnaki. So that's that on the ETs versus angels question. They are not the same thing. Gods and goddesses and immortal beings. You can, I think it's better to use the term immortal beings, or you could say deities. Like I said in the beginning, there's the God with the big G, the creator God, the Elohim that created everything. And then there are also lower, I'm not going to say lower dimensional because that's not exactly right, but there are gods below the big guy, the big one. And those are the gods with the small g's. But like I said, I think it's better to say deities, or you could say immortal beings. And they exist. Okay, so I'm jumping around. Let me just read what I wrote. Our gods and goddesses that had lives on earth really, okay, so this was a question that came about from videos that I've seen or heard or whatever. Did they have lives on Earth? Excuse me, the gods and goddesses that had lives on Earth, like the ancient Greeks and Roman ones and all that stuff, and others as well, Egypt. Were they really ETs, or were they angels, or what were they? They were not. They were not ETs. They were not angels. They were their own type of beings. The Anunnaki were the only beings that humans referred to as gods that were actually interdimensional beings, and that's because that's what the Anunnaki kind of taught them to believe at the time. All other gods of various mythologies around the world over the course of history, they are a different type of spiritual being, separate from angels and ascended masters. They also exist in the 10th through 12th dimensions, the same as the angels and the ascended masters and our souls. These immortal beings, these deities, they can also be both light and dark, which is also the same for ascended masters, by the way. So, okay, let's look at all of them. Angels. Good angels are angels. Evil angels are demons. There's no fallen angels, as we have already discussed. That's just angels that chose to be interdimensional beings. Angels are good angels. I don't know how else to say that. And demons are the evil angels. Ascended masters, there's no separate terminology. Okay, so there's separate terminology for angels and demons. Ascended masters and the deities, there's no separate terminology. Just some are good and some are evil. And I had already been told by Spirit that there are evil ascended masters as well. So we obviously know that Jesus and many other ascended masters are the Great White Brotherhood, are good. The Great White Brotherhood. The Great White Brotherhood are good ascended masters. And there's the Great Dark Brotherhood. And there are evil ascended masters as well. And with the deities, with the immortal beings, there are good ones and there are bad ones. And there's no probably about it. And there are some that walk the line in between that as well, that can go back and forth. Look at Isis, actually. I remember stories about her that it was questionable of, is she good or is she bad? Because she did a lot of good things, but she also did some bad things. Anyway, I don't remember well enough, so I'm not going to try and remember and guess. I'm going to run out of time. But these immortal beings, they can walk that line as well, because that's, part of their role and their purpose. And, all of these different types of beings, whether they're good or evil, it's part of their purpose and journey in spirituality and how they lead and exist within all of the worlds and realms. That's their purpose. Some are supposed to be only good. Some are supposed to be only bad. Some are supposed to be in between and walking the line, because that's part of their purpose and their soul missions overall. Okay. So they can be both light and dark, due to polarity. And I discussed angels and demons, immortal beings. Okay, light, immortal beings that are good, that are of the light, are permanently immortal. Dark immortal beings can be destroyed and can lose their immortality when they do something that warrants it. And when that's the case, the Elohim will give specific instructions to whoever is able to complete them. That could be certain people, humans on Earth, practitioners, or I'm sure it could be other types of beings as well. But dark immortal beings can lose their immortality by instructions by the Elohim when they do something wrong. And that's everything. The biggest thing was about the gods and goddesses and the immortal beings. And one of the things that I have learned just from my experience working in spiritual warfare in more recent years is that these immortal beings, they're on Earth now too. People probably don't realize that. Of course, we hear all the stories about the mythologies back with ancient Greece and all that stuff. The gods and the goddesses were, present on Earth more and interacting with humans. And, I'm pretty sure that really happened, even though we're taught that it was just myth. But where do these stories come from? They come from somewhere that originated in actually happening. we're just taught to believe that it didn't really happen and that they're just stories. But no, they really were here, and they did play bigger roles amongst humanity at that time. Now, I have not spent time discussing that with Spirit and trying to understand why and what the purpose was. But obviously, there was reasons at the time. There was reasons why they were present on Earth, functioning as gods and goddesses amongst humans in the ways that they did, and that it was okay and it was allowed back then. That's obviously changed at some point over the course of time. So we're basically in the realm now of questions that that could be asked of Spirit to understand why. I don't know these answers yet. I have not talked to Spirit about them, and I'm probably not going to have time to talk to Spirit about them anytime soon either. You guys can feel free to send me more questions, and I'll add them to my list, but I can't make promises on when. But I will say, so these are the questions that come to mind for me. And that's, like I said, like, when and why did they stop, existing on Earth? When and why did they, leave Earth and start existing in the higher dimensions instead? Maybe that has something to do with when God, when the Elohim, inserted the chosen race, the 144,000 bloodlines and all of that. But I don't know for sure. So in any case, when and why did the immortal beings, the deities, the gods with the lower G, when did they stop living on Earth amongst the people? But then also, one of the things that I've learned is that some of them are here, just incarnated in human bodies as well, but just people don't know that. I know this because my soul group had to defeat one, and that one has a million questions for me too, or has given me a million questions too, of wondering, well, how does that work? If this is an immortal being incarnated in a human body, how does that work? Do they have to keep switching bodies? Does the body just live for a while? For a long time? For how long? I don't know. And I've heard of both good and bad ones. Obviously we had to defeat one, so that was a bad one. That was an evil one. But there's good ones as well. And I also am aware of humans that have been granted immortality because of whatever experiences they've been through and whatever sacrifices they've made on their spiritual paths. They have taken on soul missions to help the world ascend, to help humanity, to fight spiritual battles, and because of that have been granted immortality as well, in order to be able to carry on those spiritual warfare battles and assist the world and humanity with ascending. I'm aware of all of these things. I'm aware of the people that have been granted that. I'm aware of that there are both good and bad immortal beings incarnated in human bodies on Earth. And, well, that's everything I'm aware of. And now the next question is, are there other immortal beings, gods and goddesses on Earth in other forms as well? All valid questions. So the biggest thing is that I just wanted to, tell you about it, because I think it's friggin' fascinating and really cool, actually. And it just, like I said, it raises a lot more questions of how and why and how does it work. My brain wants to know all that stuff, but I don't have time to discuss all that with Spirit right now. But yeah, so that's more of what's going on, and more of what I have been informed about from the Elohim. So feel free to send me your questions to add to the list. And like I said, that's everything. I know I keep looking over here. Every time I look over, I'm looking at my notes. That's everything that I have right now, though. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. Since I still have time at the end of this video, I actually want to throw one more thing out there, just for you guys to be aware of. Because Earth is in the process of ascending and Earth's frequency is fluctuating between 3D, 4D, and maybe, I'm not sure if it's starting to dip into 5D or not. I don't actually think just yet. But because the frequency is fluctuating and it's gradually rising, aliens, interdimensional beings are sometimes becoming visible on Earth. Like, that's what has happened in some of the stories that we've heard on the media, like the whole thing that happened at the Miami Mall where people saw two gray aliens because they basically accidentally became visible without realizing it because of like the solar flares and the frequency fluctuations of Earth at the time. And then it was kind of like, it makes me think of in E.T. when Drew Barrymore's character saw E.T. is like, they each saw each other and everybody screamed and ran. No one was expecting that. The Greys weren't expecting that either. I actually, back then I had a conversation with, it was actually some similar spiritual beings from Planet X that came to talk to me and explained what happened to me at the time. There's more to that story, but I can't get into it right now. Anyway, those Planet X beings came to talk to me. They were a mixture. I was going to say Anunnaki, but I don't think I know that they had told me that they had a mixture of DNA, just like the same way the Anunnaki played around with the human DNA here. Same thing on their planet. They do a lot of that DNA experimentation. And so the ones that I spoke to, they did tell me that they were a combination of intergalactic DNA. So I'm not sure what the right terminology is. But anyway, that's what they told me happened at the Miami Mall. And I know that it's happening in other situations too. That's probably why we're seeing more UFO sightings right now. So basically, you can start seeing stuff in person or on videos. Be aware. And so you're not taken by surprise. Okay, there's one more thing I want to talk about real quick. I got to squeeze it in fast. I channeled this talking to Jesus years ago. I don't even remember when, maybe 2020, a little later. Now I'm seeing spiritual teachers talk about this, and they're saying the same thing as what I channeled, which is super validating for me. But now I also feel safe to talk about it because others are too. And back then I didn't feel like most people could handle this, but it seems like now is a good time. So I'm going to tell you what Jesus told me. There's a lot happening with Ascension and Earth between now and 2070. By the year 2070, Earth and humanity are supposed to be fully sixth dimensional. 2020 to 2030 is the first Armageddon, the removal of 3D evil. And by 2030, Earth is meant to be primarily 4D and 5D. 2040 to 2050 is the second Armageddon and the removal of 4D evil. And by 2050, Earth is meant to be primarily 5D. And 2060 to 2070 is the third Armageddon, the removal of galactic 5D evil. And by the end, Earth will be fully sixth dimensional. So there's a lot happening in a short amount of time, and we're going to be seeing and experiencing a lot of changes over the coming decades.